Welcome everyone to another video discussion of free answer writing practice by Vajiram and Ravi. In the month of January, we are going to see questions from GS2 for mains answer writing, but with focus on prelims concept. Today, we are going to see questions from Union, Executive and Legislature. Let us see the overview of the three questions that we are going to see. The very first question is with respect to power, privileges and immunities, which is based on Article 105 for the legislature. Over here, we have seen that they are not codified, and for the same, there are certain kind of reasons. So we will talk about those reasons, and we will also talk about that how can we address the problems because of certain kind of non-codification of those privileges. The second question is with respect to the role of Rajya Sabha. We have seen that how Rajya Sabha is a crucial part of parliament, but there are certain kind of challenges. So we will talk about the careful appraisal of the role of Rajya Sabha. In the third question, we will be talking about the grounds for disqualification under Representation of Peoples Act 1951. Over here, we'll talk about certain kind of criteria because of which the legislature may be disqualified. At the same time, we will also talk about the remedies available to such person. So let us start with the very first question. The very first question, let's read it together. The power, privileges and immunities of Parliament and its member as envisaged in Article 105 of the Constitution leave room for a large number of uncodified and unenumerated privileges to continue. Assess the reasons for the absence of legal codification of parliamentary privileges and how can this problem be addressed. Now if you see the question, we have two direct demands. We have to talk about the reasons behind the absence of legal codification of the parliamentary privileges, which is going to be the heading 1 of the body. And in the heading 2, we will talk about how this problem can be addressed, as in the potential solution. Again, if you want to structure the answer in the introduction, we will be talking about the context, as in what is the kind of issue which is reflected based on this first statement, as in there are certain privileges under Article 105, but they are not codified, and because of the same, we have seen there are certain kind of issues. So we will start with the same about talking the context of Article 105. In the introduction, in the body, as we talked about, we'll talk about the reasons behind this kind of absence of legal codification in heading 1. In heading 2, we will talk about the solutions for the same. And in the conclusion, we will talk about what way ahead we can do. So let us start with the introduction. You can talk about that Article 105 is related to the power, privileges of the Houses of Parliament and of members and committees thereof. Over here, you can also talk about there are certain recent context where we have seen that privileges of legislature, they lie as in the grey area, and we have seen that harsh punishment is rare. We can also talk about certain news related to defamation, that parliamentary privileges in case of defamation justified or not. So these are the kind of current affairs that you can integrate in the introduction to set the context. Then in the transition line, you can talk about that there are certain reasons behind this kind of non-codification, and you can go ahead with the body's heading 1, where you can talk about reasons for those non-codification of the parliamentary privileges. The very first reason that you can think about is basically the political consideration. We have seen multiple parties have different kind of ideas with respect to the privileges, and thus there is a dissonance when we are talking about a consensus over here. And because such consensus is not reached, we have not seen the codification of those privileges. The second is with respect to the parliamentary autonomy. The makers of our constitution, they understood that the legislature, they need certain kind of protection, certain kind of immunities and privileges when they are talking in the parliament or in the state legislatures. They need to have certain kind of safeguards, and for the same, those privileges were accorded. Now, the codification was not taken in place to ensure that if codified, there are certain instances where they can be misused. So thus, for the parliamentary autonomy, they were not codified. The third, we have diverse sources. Now, complicated codification arises due to privileges originating from various sources like constitution, parliamentary law, house rules, conventions, and judicial interpretation. Now, this creates a very complex web of creating certain kind of codification, and thus we have seen absence of that kind of codification. And lastly, we can talk about that how codification can create Pandora's box and it is open to manipulation and abuse, as in it can impact the freedom of speech of the parliamentarian. So this is something you can write for the reasons for non-codification. Let us move on to the second demand in heading 2, which is possible solutions. Over here, we can start with a little bit nudge towards comprehensive legislation is possible over here, where precise outline of the scope and limitation of the privileges can be done to ensure clarity for all stakeholders. We have seen that there is one reason behind non-codification, that was open to manipulation and certain kind of abuse. But at the same time, if all the stakeholders, if they can come to certain kind of consensus, there is possibility of comprehensive legislation which cannot be misused. Second, we can talk about establishing a parliamentary privilege committee which can routinely update the privileges as per the latest judicial interpretation, as well as the legislatures who have created certain kind of laws. So based on both, we can have certain kind of privileges, and thus parliamentary committee related to privileges routinely check those issues. It will also promote transparency and accountability of the legislatures. Third is codification of contempt laws. Now again, if we have seen that there are certain kind of vague criteria, and by codification there is possibility to ensure there is absolute amount of transparency. And lastly, judicial oversight by establishing a transparent process for judicial review for the privileges that which can clash with the fundamental rights. This can ensure fair and balanced resolution of those issues. So these are the kind of possible solutions for the issue related to codification of privileges. Now in the conclusion, you can talk about way ahead. Over here you have the opportunity to talk about that how there is need to balance the privileges of the legislature so that they are representative of the masses, so that they can speak freely about the issues. At the same time, there is also need for certain kind of clarity with respect to codification, so all the stakeholders have clear understanding what are the kind of privileges. So we need a certain kind of balance with respect to the codification of privileges. So that is all for question number 1. Let us see the model answer and understand how can we inculcate the same in our answer writing practice. Firstly, in the introduction, you can give brief about Article 1 of 5 and talk about that how there are certain kind of issues with respect to non-codification. You can also talk about what are the kind of problems in a mind map, as in issues. You can talk about uncertainty, misuse, and lastly, accountability. So these are the kind of issues. This is something you can create as a mind map just below introduction and then transition to the body, where in the heading 1 you will talk about the reasons, and in the heading 2 you will talk about the potential solutions. And lastly, in the conclusion, you can give a balance way ahead where you talk about the balance of privileges as well as need for codification. So that is all for question number 1. Let us move on to question number 2. Let's read the question number 2 together. A careful appraisal of the role of Rajya Sabha has become necessary in ensuring the effective functioning of the Indian Parliament. Comment. Now this question is very straightforward. It is talking about the role of Rajya Sabha. So if we divide the question, let us understand the structure first. In the introduction, you can briefly talk about Rajya Sabha. You can talk about the articles in the constitution related to the Rajya Sabha. You can also talk about certain kind of current affairs which you can integrate in the introduction. In the body part, firstly, you can talk about certain kind of role, as in of Rajya Sabha with respect to the functioning of Indian Parliament. In the heading 2, you can talk about that why there is need for careful appraisal. Over here, you will talk about certain shortcomings. Over here, you will talk about certain limitations, certain issues that are presently with Rajya Sabha, and thus in the conclusion, you will talk about way ahead, that what we need to do to ensure those limitations are eliminated. So that is the structure of this question. Let us start with the introduction. In the introduction, you can briefly talk about Rajya Sabha. You can talk about that how Article 79 talks about that Rajya Sabha is a crucial part of Indian Parliament. You can also talk about the inception of Rajya Sabha based on Government of India Act 1919. So that is something you can also talk about. At the same time, you have also the potential to talk about that how Rajya Sabha is the reflection of Indian federalism and is also called Council of State. So that is something you can talk about in the introduction. You can put a transition line in the introduction itself that how Rajya Sabha is very crucial for the democracy as well as the parliamentary system of the nation. In the heading 1 of the body, you can start with the role of Rajya Sabha in effective functioning of Indian Parliament. The very first point you can talk about over here is check and balance on Lok Sabha. We have seen that how Rajya Sabha, with respect to ordinary bill, constitutional amendment bills, Rajya Sabha plays same role on par with Lok Sabha. So thus, it kind of creates certain structures with respect to checks and balances. Second, you can talk about deliberation of important national issues. As we have seen that members of Rajya Sabha can raise certain issues through multiple tools of the legislations and thus raise important national issues and capture the conscience of the Indian masses to understand what are the kind of issues and how they can be tackled. So that is something with respect to deliberation of important national issues. Third is with respect to scrutiny of executive. Over here, we have seen that there are certain kind of resolutions that Rajya Sabha members can also initiate, such as censure motion, where they can definitely make sure that executives are held accountable. The fourth is with respect to the representation of experts. We have seen in Article 80 that Rajya Sabha has certain kind of possibilities where experts can be given space for their representation in the House. Over here, we have to understand through the representation of experts, we can understand what are the kind of issues in depth. Fifth is with respect to the continuity and stability. Now, unlike Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha is a continuous house, as in it is not dissolved and thus it provides for certain kind of stability. And lastly, we have seen special powers of Rajya Sabha with respect to all India services, with respect to state list, and also with respect to emergency. So these are the kind of special powers that Rajya Sabha is accorded with, and thus that is the kind of role it plays in ensuring effective functioning of the Indian Parliament. So that is all for heading 1 of the question number 2. Let us see the heading 2, which is going to be the need for careful appraisal of these rules in Rajya Sabha. Over here, we are ensuring that we understand the kind of limitations that are presented over here, and thus in the conclusion, we can talk about certain way ahead. So firstly, we have seen that there is asymmetric representation of state. As Rajya Sabha is Council of State, it represents the federal nature of the country. However, we have seen that there is asymmetry in the representation of states, unlike different models such as USA, where each state get fixed amount of seats in equal manner in the Senate. But for Rajya Sabha, we have asymmetry, like Uttar Pradesh has almost 31 seats, whereas we have seen smaller states having just 1 seat. This kind of asymmetric representation also represents certain kind of asymmetrical power distribution as well as the representation of the people in the parliament. So that can be understood as a kind of a challenge. Second, we have seen deliberation of important national issues. Now over here we have seen that how there are certain kind of issues which are not exactly presented in Rajya Sabha due to lack of participation of the members. We have also seen the representation of experts where they again have issues with respect to the active participation according to PRS research. We have seen in the 16th Parliament, 16th Rajya Sabha, according to PRS research, we have seen that only 2% of the debates are participated by the nominated expert members. That again reflects the limitation of Rajya Sabha. Then we have seen that how Rajya Sabha plays limited role in the budget process and money bill. Fifth point, you can talk about it how Rajya Sabha becomes a kind of a place for unsuccessful candidates. And lastly, we can talk about that there is need for enhanced responsibility as it is a permanent body. So that these are the kind of limitations that you can talk about for Rajya Sabha in heading 2. In the conclusion, you can talk about that Rajya Sabha should definitely reform certain kind of limitation to ensure it reflects its true potential and nature, and thereby make sure that the functioning of the Indian Parliament is effective and efficient. So that is something you can write for question number 2's conclusion. Let us see the model answer and understand how can we structure the same for our answer writing practice. So in the introduction, we will talk about the constitutional provision as well as the inception through Government of India Act 1919. You can also talk about the main function, which is deliberative and reflective function of Rajya Sabha. In the heading 1 of the body, you will talk about the role of Rajya Sabha in effective functioning of the Indian Parliament. You will list down the proof point along with the substantiation. In the heading 2, you will list down the need for careful appraisal of these roles of Rajya Sabha. Again, you will list down the proof points along with the example. In the conclusion, you can talk about the way ahead, how exactly there is need for in-depth assessment of this issue, and we need to provide certain kind of measures to ensure the conclusion is holistic in nature. So that's it for question number 2. Let us see question number 3. Let's read the question number 3 together. On what grounds a people's representative can be disqualified under the Representation of Peoples Act 1915? 1. Also mention the remedies available to such person against this disqualification. So if you see this question, there are two core demands. Firstly, we have to talk about the grounds a people's representative can be disqualified, and in the second heading, in the second demand is going to be the remedies available to such person against their disqualification. So if we structure the answer in the introduction, you can briefly talk about the act, as in what exactly is the nature of the act and what is its utility. In the body, in the heading 1, you can talk about the ground that a people's representative can be disqualified. In the heading 2, you can talk about those remedy. In the conclusion, you can talk about way ahead. So that is going to be the structure of this question number 3. In the introduction, we can talk about briefly for the Representation of Peoples Act 1951. You can basically talk about that how this act is basically about the qualification and disqualification with respect to the elected representatives, and there are certain rules and regulations with respect to the disqualification as well as remedies against the same. Then in the heading 1, you can talk about the criteria for disqualification under the act. The first point you can talk about is with respect to the section 8 of the act, where there are certain disqualification on conviction of certain offences. There are multiple sections for the same. The first section talks about incitement of hatred, which is section 153A. Over here, we have seen that if any representative is found guilty with respect to the incitement of hatred, they shall be disqualified. Second is with respect to Protection of Civil Rights Act 1955, where in case those elected representatives are found guilty with respect to propagating certain kind of practices such as untouchability, they are also disqualified. Also, in Lily Thomas case or 2013, we have seen that if any legislature is found guilty and the punishment for the same is more than 2 years, they shall be disqualified on the spot. So that is something you can talk for the first point. The second point, for the section 8A, we have seen that how corrupt practices such as bribery can also lead to disqualification. The third point is with respect to disqualification for dismissal for corruption or disloyalty, which is under section 9 of the act. Again, similar kind of reflection, as in if they are found with respect to corruption or disloyalty, they shall be disqualified. The fourth is disqualification for government contracts under section 9A, where if any legislature who is elected and is also part and presently working for a government contract, they shall be disqualified. This is to ensure that they do not abuse the power that they are accorded. The fifth is failure to lodge account of election expense under section 10A. we have seen that there are certain kind of election expenditure caps, and to ensure that there is transparency, if any legislature who is elected and fails to show that kind of expense, they shall be disqualified under the RPA Act 1951. So these are the kind of criteria that we have seen for disqualification under this act. Now let us see in the heading 2, what are the kind of remedies we have against those disqualification. Firstly, the relevant person can appeal to higher court and understand and ensure that if their disqualification is not based on the right ground, they can be discarded. The second is appeal to the president to make sure that they can also again remove such kind of disabilities as in disqualification. President can again understand the same issue from Election Commission of India, and thus those are the kind of remedies we have with respect to the President and Election Commission. Third is removal or reduction of disqualification period. We have seen under section 11 that again there are certain instances where Election Commission can revisit the disqualification and may remove or reduce the disqualification period. And lastly, we can talk about that how pardon from president can also help with respect to the removal of disqualification. So these are the kind of points you can write for the heading 2 of body of question number 3. Let us move on to the conclusion of this answer. In question number 3, you can conclude with a way ahead where you can talk about that the Representation of Peoples Act 1951 have certain kind of proof points with regard to what are the kind of grounds for disqualification and how there are certain kind of remedies. Thus, this represents the very true essence of protecting the Indian democracy. So again, you can integrate the kind of points over here for the same for question number 3's conclusion. And going ahead, we can talk about that how the act needs to be revisited and ensure further more grounds, if there are possible, can be added. And again, there are certain remedies which can be updated as per the need. So that is all for question number 3's conclusion. Let us see the model answer and understand how can we inculcate the same in our answer writing practice. Firstly, in the introduction, you can talk about the brief of the act, as in what exactly is the essence of the act, is about the election of state legislature and parliament, and talks about the eligibility as in for disqualification and dispute resolution. Then you can talk about the criterias with respect to the disqualification under the act, and you can talk about the remedies in the heading 2. And lastly, you can talk about the conclusion that how election serves as a lifeblood for any democracy, and thus there needs to be continuous reforms with respect to the election. So that is something for question number 3. So that's all for today's video discussion. Keep writing and thank you so much.